Hi everybody, today we are going to use what we have learned before in dividing decimals by whole numbers, and with the power of 10 lesson we had in 4.5, we are going to divide by decimals. So I'm going to give you an example of if you go to a pumpkin patch and you buy a pumpkin that weighs 9.5 pounds and you pay $4.75 for that pumpkin. What is that price per pound? So what I'm asking you to be able to do is to solve the problem 9.5 going into 4.75 or $4.75 to find out the price per pound. If you would take a moment, pause the video, and write down the key concept. When you divide by a decimal, multiply both the divisor and dividend. Here's the divisor, and here's the dividend, by a power of 10. We learned that in 4.5. That will make the divisor a whole number. So this question right here is going to force us, if we want this to be a power of 10, we multiply it times 10 to get it to be a whole number of 95. So we're just going to put that decimal right there. If you do that, in order for the math to work out, everything has to be fair. These are like brother, sister. If you multiply the divisor by 10, you have to do the dividend by 10. You're not changing the value of the whole expression if you do the same thing. It's just like in algebra when you do the same thing to both sides. So we're multiplying this times 10, this times 10. Just like in our last lesson, this decimal point floats up to the top and sits there. Now our decimal is placed for the rest of the question. Well, if you look, the 95 is not going to go into a 4 or a 47, not even one time. But I do happen to know that if you multiply it by 5, you might have to do some work out here showing your process out to the side to try some numbers that will get close. I know that 5 times 5 is 25. 9 times 5 is 45 plus the 2 is 47. And there we go. It ends up to be an even number, which is a 0.5 or half or 5/10, which equals 50 cents per pound. The first skill I want you to go through is how to rewrite a problem or an expression. So in this case, if the problem asks you to simply rewrite it, you need to realize that in order to get 2.5 into 25, you have to swoosh it over one place or multiply it by 10. And if we do the same thing under here, you would swoosh this over to right here. So it ends up being the same as 18.3 divided by 25. They are exactly equal. If you are going to rewrite 15 hundredths goes into 3, remember those cows come home zeros. I can just look at it and see this needs to be multiplied times 100, and so does this. So 0.15 into 3 is the same as 300 divided by 15. Next, I would like you to try these 3 questions. Go ahead and pause the video, and I only want you to rewrite them. Please do not solve them yet. We will get to that in our next step, but just rewrite them. So this divisor has no decimal in it. Whatever you do here, you need to do to the dividend, or what's under the garage, as I like to say. So go ahead and pause it right now. And now let's go through the answers. So in order for this to be a whole number 7, this now has to become a 56. So it's the same as 56 divided by 7. In this one, we have to multiply it 3 places or times 1,000, and this becomes 66.5. In this one, it's just 1 multiplied by 10, multiply this by 10, and it becomes 38 goes into 45.6. The final step to this is actually finding the quotient, or the answer to this question. So if we are going to divide 88 hundredths by 1.6, we start out with seeing, oh, we got to make that a whole number. So we're going to multiply this by 10 and this by 10. When you do that, it balances out what you're doing. Just like you wouldn't want your brother or sister to get something that you didn't get from your parents. So if you're fair and do the same thing to both, you end up getting the equivalent, the equal answer as what you would get. But it's easier to think, how many 16s are there in 88? So let's explore that one just a moment, and I am going to multiply 16 times 5. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. And now I have 8 at the bottom. What am I to do? I have a remainder. Don't forget, we can add those cows come home zeros and scooch that right down. We have already done this before. We know that 16 goes into 80 exactly 5 times. And the answer comes out even. It is 55 100ths. This is the work that I do expect to see on your assignment. No one can process this many steps at a time, and I do want to see your steps. Okay, the next one we are going to go to is we are going to divide 30 by 0.02. I'm going to go ahead and do this in another color so you can remember what it is we're doing. Now remember, this is like 30.0, and I can already see I have to multiply this times a 100, or 2 swishes to the right. So if I do 2 swishes to the right, oops, I need another cows come home 0. And then when that's there, you just float that to the top, and let's begin. 2 goes into 3 one time. That's a 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. Bring down that 0. And then we have a 5. 2 goes into 10 5 times. And we've already zeroed out, but we have to deal with this next place, so we do have to put that 0 up there, and we do have to put that 0 up there. I want to remind you what we're doing here. Let's say we have $30, and we want to see how many groups of 2 pennies are in $30. Well, there's 1,500 groups of 30 pennies in that $2. I'm going to give you a couple more questions to try and then turn you loose on your assignment for the day. Before we do that, I want to talk to you about a word that is in the assignment that a lot of kids struggle with, and that's the word reciprocal. So if you were to look at a number like 0.5. Oops. A lot of you know if I were to write that as a fraction, that would be 5/10. Okay? some of you might even know it by the name 1/2. But if I say 5/10, that is written as this fraction, 5/10. A reciprocal, and what I want you to do is draw a little guy upside down. A reciprocal is a headstand. So a reciprocal of 5/10 is 10/5. You simply flip it. It flips upside down. So if I were to give you the number, let's see, let's do 856, and let's put the decimal right here. So we are going to do 8 56/100. So I'm going to do 856/100. That is what that is equal to, and I want the reciprocal, or the headstand of that. There he goes. We're going to stand that on its head, and it's going to be 100/856. All right, I am going to put some questions for you to try, and then we are going to go through the difference between this and whole numbers, and I'll turn you loose. All right, so the first question that I want you to try is 2/10 into 99/100. Remember, we multiply this by 10, we multiply this by 10, and that decimal floats to the top. It's already placed and ready to go for our answer. 2 goes into this first 9 4 times. 4 times 2 is 8. Let's do the subtracting. We end up with 19. 2 goes into 19 9 times, and that gives us 18. Uh-oh, we ended up with a 1. Don't forget the cows come home 0. They're freebies. And 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. And it ends up coming out to an even 4 95/100. What we did in the last lesson on division is we didn't have to deal with anything. This is already a whole number, so this simply floats to the top. And again, we can add as many cows come home 0s after that 0.99 as we want. What ends up happening is you end up doing the same process. Bring that 0 down. You end up getting the same numerals up here, but the decimal place is very, very different. So this is like having $4.95, and this is like having nearly 50 cents, because 0.495 or 495 thousandths. So note the difference. If you see that decimal right before a number, you cannot deal with it. It needs to be a whole number out front, and you can swoosh as many times here as you do here in order to place that decimal. Good luck on your assignment today. Don't forget about the reciprocals. That's thrown in there and it can get confusing. Please ask questions if you have any questions. We're here to help.